Kent C. Dodds is our keynote speaker today. He is a world-renowned speaker. He's been all over the place. In fact, the first time I met Kent was in Europe, preparing for a conference. I met Kent in his hotel room before we went to the conference together. He is a teacher, he is a trainer, and he's actively involved in the open source community, has contributed and maintained many interesting and useful open source projects. In fact, you might even say into the hundreds of NPM packages, and not just counting his multi-gigabyte node modules folder. Kent is the creator of testingjavascript.com, and he's an instructor at egghead.io and Front-End Masters. He's also a Google developer expert. Kent is happily married and the father of 4 kids. He likes his family, he likes code, he likes JavaScript and React. Will you please give a warm welcome to our keynote speaker, Kent C. Dodds.
That was a warm welcome. Thank you. I released a big project that I've been working on for the last long time, KentCDodds.com, a total relaunch of that, just on Monday. And I'm going to show you how I built it because it's pretty sweet. Yeah, you already did this part, so good on ya. This is good for your brain. Your Brian needs this. I saw this yesterday when I was practicing. I totally forgot to fix it. So yes, Brian, you're welcome. So this is a high-level tour of a real-world modern website and the tools that I use to build it. It's not contrived. As an educator, I'm always walking the line between showing contrived examples so you can focus on what you're learning and real-world examples so you can see how what you're learning applies. This is the real-world example, and it's very gratifying to be able to show you something like significant and real that is open source, and I can show you all of this stuff like I couldn't do at any of the companies that I've worked at before. So I want to give you an idea of what this is. This isn't just like your developer, like your blogfolio thing. This is like a legit real-world thing. And so I put together this intro video that I want to show you now. Thanks. Thank you. Yeah, KentCDodds.com is my personal website. I have podcasts on there. You can actually call me right in the browser, and I will respond, and our conversation turns into a podcast. So this is not just like a website with static stuff. This is a web application. And then we have user accounts and all of this stuff. It's all server rendered, super fast, and I'm going to show you as much as I can in the limited time that I have. I did start early, so give me the thumbs up if I'm OK going. Yes, sweet. We might actually be able to cover more things than I expected. So this is great. So it's 27,000 lines of code. So yeah, it's not like the 300,000 lines of code that you and your team of 12 other developers have been maintaining for the last 5 years. But I've been working on this primarily since like around June is when I really ramped up on it. And working with one other developer primarily, and had an Illustrator, UI dev, so like a full team. It's a legit real-world application, and it's using some really awesome and modern things. I definitely over-engineered it because I wanted to. I don't know if I'd say it's over-engineering. It's just so sick. It's awesome, and I wanted to learn about all of these things so that I could teach you all about it. So. It takes a lot of technology to build a website like this, and these are all of the primary technologies that I'm using that I wanted to share with you. Don't have time to go into all of them, but they're all linked. So if you, at the end of my slides, I have a link to the deck, and you can come and like, what the heck is this thing, or whatever. So come take a look at the technology that I used to build this site. We're going to focus in on one first, and it's the one piece of technology that made me more productive than anything else that I used. And no, it's not React. It's Remix. If you've been following me on Twitter, you were expecting this, because I've been tweeting about Remix nonstop for as long as I've been working on the website. Remix is the next big thing. If you are like, what the heck is Remix? Think of like Next.js or Gatsby. This is a replacement for those tools. You wouldn't use them together. So Remix is a React-based framework that just has made me super productive. And the elephant in the room about Remix is that it's paid software. But Ryan told me that I could tell you something, and I'm going to let him tell you. So go ahead and read this Discord message I got yesterday. So if you haven't heard of Remix before, you were like, yeah, I don't care. If you have and you've been wanting to use it, but the whole pricing paid software thing was kind of a frustration for you, then you'll be excited about this. This is huge, huge news. And look forward to Monday. So I want to tell you, he sent me this yesterday. So yeah, we just got an email this morning as subscribers. OK, so here's one of the things that I love about Remix. The first is that in most applications, our client is all React, and our server is our Node thing. We've got server rendering, and so there's a little bit of like our React stuff is running on the server. What Remix does really well is it blurs the gap between client and server just phenomenally well. And I want to show you some examples of how it does this. So this is my sign-up page, and every time you come to the sign-up page, the koalas are in a totally different order, because I didn't want to give preferential treatment to the blue team, which is the best. No, actually, I think the yellow team right now is winning. So the different teams are able to own a particular blog post, and all of the links changed their color and everything. So the more people on your team relative to how many people you have who've read the blog post are the ones who own the blog post. Think of it like a Pokemon Go gym. It's pretty fun. But I didn't want to give any preferential treatment to any one team, and so their order just randomly changes. Now, I can't do this on the client, because then we'll get a hydration error saying, hey, like these are in the wrong order. So I need to do this on the server. And it's not like super difficult, but it's difficult enough with other tools that I've used that I wouldn't have bothered. I would have just said, oh, I'll just have it be in the specific order. But with Remix, I kept running into this thing where it's just like, I have this idea for this thing that I want to do. Wow, yeah, that's so easy. I guess I'll do it. Whereas with other technologies that I'd used, I'll have the idea, and then I'll think, you know, I'd have to do all this other stuff. I'll just do something else. I'll move on. And so with Remix, you export or each of your routes is a module that you export different things from. And here we have our loader, which is a loader function. I can take the teams that I have and shuffle them up in any order, and I do that on the server. And so then on both on the server and the client, they're going to get that data, and I can just map over those teams in that order, and I don't have to worry about hydration issues or anything. And it maps really nicely from here I do something on the server, here I do something on the server and the client, and I don't have to worry about hydration issues or anything like that. Gets to be even cooler here in a second. So the other cool thing about this is and actually I failed to mention, there's no use effect, no is loading, no is error. My component expects the data to be there, and it's just there. And I'll show you more about loading and error states here in a little bit too. But I very rarely have to use effect or something like React Query to manage all of my network stuff. It's all inside of Remix. And so my code is really declarative, clean. I don't have to worry about race conditions, any of that stuff. It just melts away. It's inside of Remix. And so then on pages where I'm loading data, like my Chats with Kent seasons of episodes, I can say, hey, go get me all the seasons. And this will hit a third-party API, the Simplecast API, to go get all the data. And this is all running on the server, so I can actually filter it out in here and just say, here are the pieces that I want. So here are list items. For the list page, I don't need to have the transcript and all of that other data in there. I just need the list page. And I don't need to make a special endpoint to say, OK, go get me these special, or the data for this particular page, and then make another endpoint over here, and here's the endpoint for this particular page. It's all directly right in the component where I need that. And so I can just filter out any of the data that I don't need. And now I don't need a really complicated GraphQL client on the front end that's like over 100 kilobytes of code and very complicated caching mechanisms, which is awesome that they've been able to do that. But wouldn't it be cool if we didn't have the problem in the first place? And so with my loader function, I can just filter out all the stuff I want. I don't have data overfetching problems. And I don't even think about caching, because Remix can manage all of that for me. And so I filter down exactly what I want. It's all perfectly typed. And so when I get down to here, my season has all of the typings that I want, because TypeScript is the best. And if you're not using it, then I don't even know who you are. But yeah, it's phenomenal. And let's say that there is some sort of unexpected error here. Maybe seasons isn't an array or something weird like that were to happen. Then I can have this error boundary right as part of the module. And I say, hey, if something happens, then this is what you're going to show. And if there's actually, here, let me show you. Another cool thing about the Remix loader is that you can throw a response. And so Remix will then handle that, and then it'll pass that response off to your catch boundary. And so here, if we don't have a season, I just throw this response with a status of 404. And then down in my catch boundary, I say, oh, I caught some thrown response, so we're going to handle that and show a 404. And so this declarative error handling makes it so that my actual component for like the happy path case, which is what I'm thinking about most of the time, is totally devoid of any error handling or even pending states for most of the situation. So if there's an uncaught error, then you're going to see this. Sorry, something happened. But the rest of the page is still working. Everything else still works, and all that is busted is the nested route. That was the thing that broke. If we've got a 404, then the rest of the page still works. We can show contextually that this is the part of the page that I couldn't find anything for you, but everything else is still good. And so being able to have nested routes with declarative error handling makes the user experience so much better. And what's cool about that is I don't have to do anything extra as a user of Remix to make this nice user experience. It's just the way you do it. And so Remix does this a lot. And this is one of the things that I just love about Remix. The other thing I love about Remix is how much it uses the platform. I made this GIF months ago when I started to appreciate how awesome Remix was at enabling me to use the platform. And the whole use the platform hashtag was kind of like a jab at React months ago or years ago. And now I'm so excited to be able to say use the platform by using Remix, a React framework. I also made this one because Remix is super great at progressive enhancement, just out of the box the way that it works. So let me explain to you what I mean. So first of all, Remix uses fetch and request response for both the client as well as the server. And so most of the time that you're spending learning how to build a Remix app, you actually spend on MDN learning how to build a website, just like a regular spec-based web app. So the APIs that you're learning are web foundations, not like some fancy API that Remix invented to make things easier for you or whatever. It is easier for you, and they do have APIs to help you with this. So if you want to send JSON, there's a little bit of boilerplate if you're just going to use a new response and whatever JSON. So they have a JSON helper. They have a redirect helper. But it's all based on requests and response, which has been really nice. They also have a form. So every single mutation that you do in your application uses a Remix form. And that includes even if you have like a little button on a list item that's like the delete button, that is going to be wrapped inside of a form, which is not something that we typically do as front-end engineers. We just have like a button with an onClick handler that will go trigger the delete fetch request, right? That's how we do this. But with Remix, you use a form, and you specify the action and the method and everything on there. And so guess what happens in the inevitability when JavaScript fails to load? Your app still works, because it does a real post or a real delete request. And it'll do a full page refresh and all of that stuff, but your app still works. This is what progressive enhancement is. If things fail, then it will fall back to the web, the way that the web has always worked. And so go ahead and feel free. You can disable JavaScript on my website. Everything will still work. It may not be as awesome an experience, but you'll still get error messages. When the page reloads, you'll see the error messages. And it all just kind of falls out of the way that they've based things on the foundations of the platform, which is really awesome. They also make heavy use of link tags for informing the browser when to do certain things, like preloading modules. So if you look at lots of sites, especially when we're talking about ECMAScript modules, you have your main module, and that imports a bunch of things. And so then the browser has to parse that, and then it says, oh, I need to go get those. And so then it goes get those, and it resolves this tree. And now you've got this waterfall effect of all of these modules that it's going to request, which is not great. And so Remix, because they are also your compiler and bundler, they will preload all of the modules for you. And I'll show you something cool about that here in just a second. The other thing that they do is they will prefetch data as well using link rel prefetch as fetch. So they will actually go and fetch your data ahead of time as the user is interacting with your site. So my site before was a Gatsby site, static site generated. There wasn't a whole lot of data. I had to say no to tons of ideas that I had. But I was worried as I was moving to server-side rendering, and now I'm like doing all this dynamic stuff based on which user you are. Like literally every single one of you will get a completely different experience when you go to kentcdodds.com, because I'm able to do that because it's server rendering. And so like the blog post recommendations, all the content recommendations will be unique, specific to you based on what you've read. And so I was worried that since I'm doing all this extra work on the server, that my site isn't going to feel as fast. But if you've used my site, you'll know that it is fast. And it's awesome. And it's because Remix makes it this way. So as you're navigating around, and as you're showing Remix that you have the intent to click on a link, then Remix will add the link tags to prefetch all of the data and the JavaScript, all the assets, all the CSS and everything. And so that can get loaded into the browser's cache so that when you do end up clicking on that link, it's already there, and it can just navigate instantly. It's very fast. And so, yeah, including the data, I didn't have any CSS on the workshops page, but I'll talk about CSS in a little bit. But yeah, all of the assets are there, and so it happens super fast. And what's cool about this is even if you hover over a link, and then and you're saying, I'm going to go to this page, and then you decide, oh, actually, never mind. And then you later decide, oh, yeah, I do want to go to that page, and you open a completely new tab. With most of us, we're implementing a cache in memory in JavaScript. We've got like these really massive, complex, really awesome JavaScript-based in-memory caches. But once you close the browser or hit refresh, that cache is gone, and we've got to build it up again. Because Remix is so focused on making the browser cache be where the cache lives, then if you later go to that page, all of that stuff is cached in the browser cache. You can refresh, you can open up in a new tab. Everything is cached in the browser cache, so it happens really fast. It's super, super awesome. OK, so another thing about Remix that I love as I've built this website is CSS. I decided to go with Tailwind. It's phenomenal. Feel free to play around with all the cool little things that you can do with CSS. I just decided to skip to the end. I've been through all of that. Here we are, Tailwind. It is the answer. That's it. I worked at PayPal and many other companies where every page had like 90% unused CSS. This is just a thing that happens. And with Tailwind, you have less CSS than even the used CSS that I had on these other apps that I worked on. So skip to the end, just use Tailwind. That said, Remix makes CSS even better because now we can actually embrace the cascade rather than trying to sidestep it with magical namespacing and all this stuff that we're doing with CSS and JS. And here's how it does it. It's so simple, but it's magical. So here I'm on my About page. I have a CSS file on the page that styles all H1s to be blue. And so when I navigate over to my home page, how does that blue go away? I literally styled H1 is, the color is blue. And I go to the home page, the H1 is no longer color blue. And the way that it works, if you watch this, you'll see we have the About CSS file right here. When I go to the home page, it's gone. And that's how it works. It's so simple. I can't believe I never thought of this. But so with Remix, you say, hey, here's my route. Here's my About route. And I have this links function, and I'm going to return all of the links that I want on the page. So these are just URLs to the style sheet or whatever else I want to have on the page. And when that route is not active, those links are removed. And so now I can literally style an H1, and I'm looking at the page, and I'm seeing all of the style changes that I'm making. And not once do I need to worry about what happens when I make all these style changes, what happens on other pages. That is huge. The biggest problem with CSS is knowing what impact your changes to CSS will make throughout the app. You do not have this problem with Remix. It doesn't exist. And that is awesome. OK, so client-server cache state management. So to be clear, when you've got what we often call state on the client, that is just like stuff you've loaded from the backend, that is not state. Don't call it state. It is a cache. That is different. And you need to treat it differently. And Remix makes it so easy to manage this sort of thing. And the other thing I want to talk about with this example is nested routing. So I don't actually take advantage of a lot of this stuff as much on my site. That's why I give you this. This is your contrived example here. But hopefully you can picture this with me. So we've got our nav up here. We've got a list. And then we've got our detail. And so as I select each one of these, then we've got our detail loading. So here are a couple of things I want to point out that Remix does really well. First of all, this right here, the whole thing is one route. That's going to be your root route. This section right here, the list along with this is going to be your nested route inside of that. And then finally, the details will be a furtherly nested route. So each one of these will be their own module, and they'll be just completely responsible for what they display. And so each one of them also has their own data requirements. So my root route loader is going to need to know what user is logged in or what things they have access to. There are things that the root is going to need to know. My list is going to need to have like a subset of the data, right? Just enough to show the list. And then my details is going to need to know the actual details of whatever I have selected. And so one cool thing about Remix is that they just run all of these things in parallel. Your natural inclination might be to run this, and then the next one can actually have access to those things to do additional stuff. And that's what the way we often code this stuff, too, when we're just doing it all client-side, is we render the parent first, and then we send some of that data to the child so that it knows what IDs or whatever else it needs to go make another request, and then that goes to the next child. This triggers a waterfall effect. Remix doesn't have this problem at all. And so loaders run in parallel, meaning it runs a lot faster. Remix also only reloads what's needed. So once I land on this page, I've run all of those loaders. It was all server rendered, so it was really fast. And then if I change my selection, then Remix is only going to reload the data that is actually necessary to be changed. And so I click on this blue one, and now the only thing that is going to get reloaded is right here, and we don't need to reload the root loader or anything like that. And this is not something that we think about. It's just the way that it works. And so it's very fast for that reason also. Mutations will invalidate all the loaders. So if I make a change here and then I hit submit, then that's going to, remix is like, hey, you're making a change. I have no way of knowing what impact that change is going to make. Maybe like the change that you made is going to change the user that's logged in. I have no way of knowing. So I'm just going to invalidate all of the loaders and reload everything. And what this means is I never think about my cache, ever. I don't think about the data being up to date or anything like that. It's always up to date. And if for some reason you're like, you know what, changing this is never going to change the root data, that making that request is unnecessary, then there are ways, not today, but soon, there will be ways to opt out of that. So you don't need to worry about that either. So yeah, don't worry about stale data. It's awesome. And then if you do have some UI state, stuff that lives in the UI, then you can totally use context for that, and it's very easy, and I do that for like the sort order on my podcast. If you want to sort by descending or ascending, I store that in a context so that I can switch between seasons, and that is persisted. And so that's very easy to do. But most, like all of the server state, the server cache that I've got, I can just access directly from Remix. So if we have some state that's in the root loader here that I need access to in this descendant route, then I can just access it really easily, and I don't have to worry about doing something weird, like accessing that data in this loader or anything like that. And then finally, there's no layout component. Woo! Anybody who's used Gatsby or Next knows that this is great. You don't have to, when you're building a nested route, you can just say, here's the little piece that I care about, and I don't need to worry about the rest of the app. With everything else today, you have to, well, all other React frameworks today, you have to say, for this route, we're going to render the layout, and it will have the list over here, and then we'll render the actual contents of this page. So you don't have to think about anything except for the portion of the route that you're responsible for, which is also quite nice. OK, so that's enough about Remix specifically. Remix, like I said, was the biggest thing that made the biggest impact in my productivity, as well as the speed of my site. Now I want to talk about Prisma, which actually is the shirt that I'm wearing. I love Prisma, and it's awesome. So one of the things that I love about Prisma is I am not a back-end guy at all. I do not do back-end. I don't do databases. This is just not my thing. And Prisma made it so that I could actually have a Postgres database and feel like I sort of knew what I was doing enough to actually ship something with running Postgres. So one of the cool things about Prisma is its migrations. So the migrations, you run this little script, or you have this schema file, and you make a change to it, like now the user has a role property on it. And Prisma will generate a SQL file that you commit to your repository. So your migrations are version controlled, which is actually quite nice. They're also auto-generated. So since I used to actually be in business intelligence, that's where I got my start in the tech world. I did business intelligence. So I did like ETLs and SQL and all like optimizing queries and star schemas and stuff. That is so far from me now. I do not want to do any SQL. So having it auto-generated by Prisma is super great. But there's an escape hatch because they actually generate SQL for you and not just some magic thing of their own that they then run. I can actually make modifications if I need to. So this specific migration, I was adding a role to users. And the users hadn't had them before, and I wanted that role to be a required column or a field of the user. But because I already had users, I couldn't just make it required all at once. And so what I did was with Prisma, I said, OK, so now they have a role, but it's optional, and it defaults to member. And then I made another change to say, actually, no, it's required, and it defaults to member. And I ran the migration generation script so I could see the SQL that Prisma would generate for that. And then I deleted it and copied that and put it in here so I could just do it all in one migration. So now I can add that enum, add the column to the table, and then I updated all of the users to be members. I made myself an admin, and then made that that column required. And so I could do all of that in one migration. And so Prisma's migrations feature is stellar. I'm really happy with, like, I actually feel like I know sort of what I'm doing, or at least I have the tools to not drastically break things in a really terrible way. Prisma is phenomenal for that. The thing that I use even more, though, is the TypeScript support. So TypeScript, like I said, please use it. I want the apps that you build for me to not break, and the best way you can do that for me is to use TypeScript. So thank you. Prisma has just phenomenal TypeScript support. So I should have said at the beginning, Prisma is an ORM. It's interacting with the database. My bad. Sorry, I should have mentioned that at first. So as I'm interacting with my database, I use the Prisma client to say, hey, I want to find a bunch of users, and here are the things that I want to get from those users. So I'm going to find all the users, and these are the things that I'm going to get from that. And then Prisma, if I hover over the users, then these are the types that it's going to create for me for those users. So I'm going to get the ID, email, and first name. If I want to change what I'm getting back, I simply add the field, and Prisma types automatically add that. And so I don't have to think about it. It now, all of a sudden, auto-completes to have the team. And then all you GraphQL nerds out there who are awesome, sorry, I don't mean to, that sounded derogatory. I totally didn't mean it that way. But all you people who love GraphQL and the relationship stuff, I can do that with Prisma, and I don't need to add a bunch of resolvers and all of this stuff. I can just say, here, now just go get me the post reads. And this is a different table that we've got a key on. And I can get all the slugs for the blog posts that these users have read. And they are just added to the types automatically. And then, of course, you get distinct and include and skip and take, order by, where. All of that stuff is auto-completed and TypeScript. Mind blown. And all of you people who have had this forever in every other typed language, I know that you think it's hilarious that I'm so excited about this in JavaScript, but this is exciting for us. Okay, let us have our moment. This is great. And so when we're talking about using this with Remix, it pairs really, really nicely. So I can say, hey, let me go get my loader data. Here, I'm just going to get the users. And that's what my loader is going to return. And then in my component, which, again, is in the exact same file, I now have this data that is type safe. And I get autocomplete. And it's all just right there. I don't have to have some complex GraphQL generator or anything. Not to say that you can't use GraphQL with Remix. You totally can. That's totally a thing. People do, and it's great. But I don't need that to be able to have the niceties that people love about GraphQL. And if I wanted to change things and be like, you know what, I don't need the team anymore, then I can just remove that. And I don't worry about data overfetching or anything. If I was accessing the team, I'll get TypeScript warnings and compilation errors and everything. So Prisma makes that super nice. OK. So local development on my website is also awesome. I really like riding my one wheel, and I will take it up in Provo Canyon, up as far as you possibly can go, past Vivian Park, where you have no cell service at all, and I will work up there. So I need to be able to work offline to have that wonderful experience that I enjoy. But I'm interacting with all of these third-party APIs and for many features on my website, and so I need to be able to mock these out somehow. So I'm making these requests, and this is how I start my node server, node dot. With the way that I have things set up, if I start it with node requires dot/mocks dot, I change nothing else about my code. Everything else about my code stays exactly the same. The only thing that this does is it installs MSW and starts a server for MSW, which stands for mock service worker. It originally was a thing for just browsers, but they added support to the server. And so now MSW intercepts requests, and it will redirect it to these handlers that I write. And so I have re-implemented through Faker.js and stuff. I've re-implemented all of these APIs, so I can work completely offline and have fake data and not have to worry about not being able to use or to go up in the mountains and everything. So it's phenomenal. Your app should be able to work completely offline. You should be able to get on an airplane and continue working if that's what you want to do. And MSW makes that work for me. I love it. It's awesome. Another thing that I do a lot on my site is cache. So I want my site to be lightning fast. And I'm using APIs like GitHub, for example. GitHub is my CMS because people make pull requests to my blog posts and stuff. And I don't want to add them as members on my CMS so they can make changes and stuff. So it's just easier for me to have GitHub as my CMS. And I write all of my stuff in Markdown in MDX, and compiling and bundling all of that stuff takes like a half a second because I'm using ESBuild, and so it is pretty fast. But that is, a half a second is a long time for any time somebody wants to go see my blog post. So I need to cache that. That is expensive. And interacting with these APIs, some of them are rate limited, and I certainly, I should have mentioned this earlier, I get about 500,000 page views a month. So this is like, this is a serious thing. I would get rate limited very quickly on some of these services. So I need to cache this stuff. And the way that I do this is with Redis. And Redis is phenomenal. I host Redis on fly.io, which I don't think we'll have to, we might have a little bit of time to talk about. And it is super awesome. And now, like, for any of these APIs, I can just grab it in like 5 milliseconds and then send it off to the user. So Redis is phenomenal caching mechanism for all of these APIs. And I built this cool caching abstraction that I may open source eventually. Of course, the whole website is open source, so you can go take a look at it. But I may package that in the future for making caching really easy. I also use LRU cache, or what is it called? LRU cache, I think is what it's called on NPM for some in-memory cache stuff that I only want it cached for like 60 seconds. So it doesn't make sense to put in Redis. OK, cool. So the next thing that is exciting I want to talk about with my site is image optimization with Cloudinary. So every one of my blog posts has an image just like that may or may not be related at all to the blog post. The reason that I do this is so that when you read it and you see the image, if you see a tweet about it or something about it in the future, you'll just be reminded, oh yeah, that was the one with the pineapple or whatever it was. So images are a big problem for content-heavy sites because they can be pretty large. And if you're on a small device that has a bad network connection, then you want it to be fast. You're going to be downloading way more than you need to. So with Cloudinary, it's so good. It is so awesome what you can do with Cloudinary. So here's what it looks like for when I write one of my blog posts. It's an MDX, and I have my front matter at the top. And all I have to do is say the banner Cloudinary ID, and I say unsplash / the unsplash photo ID. So if you go to Unsplash and you like right-click on these, you'll see that it has this photo ID. So I actually don't have to upload my photos to my Cloudinary account. I have configured Cloudinary that anytime it sees an Unsplash /, it will actually go to Unsplash, get the photo by that ID, and add it to my account automatically just behind the scenes, and then apply any transforms that I want onto it. And so I don't have to worry about ever uploading any photos to my account or even adding them to my repo or any of that. I don't worry about it, which is really nice. But additionally, what happens is I've got some abstractions to use Cloudinary's amazing transform API. So here's an image tag. We've got the source that's pointing to a Cloudinary URL that says, hey, I want the width to be 15, 17 pixels. The quality is going to be auto based on the device that's requesting the image. And the format will be best for the device that's requesting the image. So I don't think about PNGs or JPEGs or which is bigger or smaller or whatever. I don't think about it. Cloudinary will do it on demand as the user is requesting it. And then it goes and gets the Unsplash photo. So that's the basic source. But progressively enhanced, if the browser happens to support the source set and sizes attributes, then we can do things even better. And I won't go too much in depth with this because of the time that we've got. But suffice it to say that sizes says how big your image will be based on the different media queries. And then the source set will say how to get images of those varying sizes. And then the browser will just request the one that matches the size that we're looking for. And this is only easy because Cloudinary has the ability for you to say what size you want that image to be. And it will automatically transform the image for you just magically in the background. Very, very, very cool. So the image is exactly the size for the device, and I don't ever have to even think. I don't even download the image to my device, which is just super cool. And then I just wanted to show you this because Cloudinary is outrageously amazing at and kind of complicated with the things that you can do with it. I'm making variables in the URL and referencing those variables as part of this to generate the social image for all of my pages. And this is, of course, all abstracted out. It took me like, I don't know, an entire day to make this, but now it's awesome. So Cloudinary is very impressive what you can do with that. OK, so I am so glad that I had extra time because this is the part where I was going to be like, we don't have any more time. And we don't. So I've got a blog post where I talk about all of this stuff that I've been talking with. You got more than the blog post has. I have an architectural overview in there where I show you my deployment pipeline with Fly.io. My app is deployed to 6 regions all over the world. It's a Node server, but I'm getting basically a CDN for my Node server. And my Postgres database is a cluster as well, deployed to all of those 6 different regions, as well as my Redis cluster. And so wherever you are in the world, you will be talking to the Node server and Postgres database and Redis cache that is closest to you. So it will be fast anywhere. Yeah, Fly.io is next level stuff. It's very cool. So go ahead and take a look at my blog post to learn more about that. I also rolled my own authentication. So take a look at that. I use passwordless authentication with magic links, and I tweeted my own sign-in magic link. That's how confident or stupid I was. In my authentication security. So go ahead and take a look at that as well. That's really cool. Or feel free to come and like stop me in the hallway and talk with me about this stuff. I'd love to chat about this stuff too. And then here's an example of my caching implementation, which we don't have time to talk about today. But it's super cool. That's everything. Thank you all very much.